got barbecue back there, and you didn't invite me. Hurt my feelings.
We are back with another episode of Trending Fantasy. Last week, we spent some time talking about our top 5 rookie running backs. This week, let's shift the conversation over to wide receiver. Mitch, start us off. Who is your wide receiver 1 in this 2025 rookie class?
It's Luther Burden. And I know that is going to be a shock to some people. I just think his floor is such a solid floor, and you hate to bring that up as like the first prospect in the class. But like everyone loves to compare like this class compared to 2024. It's not even remotely the same argument because we had Marvin Harrison Jr. walk in as a top 10 dynasty wide receiver. Malik Neighbors was right there as well. And so this was
top 15.
Yeah. So this is closer to like the 23 draft where you had Jackson Smith and Jigba come in. Then you had Quentin Johnston go right after him. You had Zay Flowers and Jordan Addison, right? They're all, we like them, but they're not. JSN's awesome now, but his rookie year was kind of blah. And that's kind of what I'm looking at with this class. But with Luther Burden, the one thing you're going to get with him, he's extremely quick. He explodes out of his cuts. If you're going to look at his stats, his 2024 end of year stats were awful. I mean, but that whole offense was just terrible. And I don't think it wasn't a product of him on the field. It was just a product of what Missouri put out there. I'll give up my comp and then I'll let John get into his notes. But for me, I think a really, really strong comp for him is Christian Kirk.
I could certainly see that. You look at Luther Burden, just under 6 feet tall, 208 pounds, coming from Missouri. And like you said, Mitch, he really suffered from quarterback play in 2024. You look at his quarterback, Brady Cook had one of the lowest adjusted completion percentage among SEC quarterbacks with at least 300 dropbacks in 2024. And in 12 games, he had 11 passing touchdowns. That kind of shows you where they were. And Luther Burden, he dealt with some injuries in 2024. So you could say, well, yeah, maybe there's a health concern with him moving forward, but those are some obstacles that he had to overcome. And like you said, I think it was a reflection more of the situation around him. He's going to come in with, maybe just under a 4.45 40. He gives you the 18-year-old breakout age. When you look at 30% threshold of breakout age, 19, 40% college dominator, final year ADOT a little bit lower, but his yak per reception, and this is something that would tie in very nicely to the Trinity tool over there at ddfantasyfootball.com. Yeah, the ADOT's lower, but when you have somebody that gives you the yak per reception of 6.1, that's something that, especially in today's NFL, I think is going to allow him to flourish. Final year contested target rate, 15%. Anything below that 26-27% mark, that's what we're looking for. His best receiving yards per team pass attempt, 3.21, which is top tier. Best season receiving yard market share and reception market share, 35%. He gives you versatility. You mentioned a Christian Kirk. He gives you the versatility, and he's able to be used in the run game. He's good against man. He creates separation. He excels at all 3 levels of the field. 55% contested catch rate in 2024. That's pretty impressive for a guy of his size, right? He's a willing blocker. I know you brought that up on the running back show last week. Yeah, we're not getting points per block.
It matters, dude. I don't care. Coaches care.
It does matter. And 85% slot rate, he's going to be one of those guys like Emeka Egbuka, like Xavier Restrepo, that are going to be a little bit higher in that regard when you compare them to the rest of the class. But he's still a guy that can play. You mentioned Christian Kirk. I don't really necessarily have a comp for him right now from an analytics perspective, still kind of tweaking some things. But Chris Godwin, maybe
I have a Godwin coming up, and that's the problem when you get these slot wide receivers. There's like the types that we like everyone's going to notice the body types kind of fit certain classes. We talked about running backs last week to where they're a little bit thicker than what they were. These wide receivers are the exact same. They're not. We have one coming up that's a little bit lighter, but they're not 180 pound 4.4 guys. These are like 210, 215, runs a 4. 6.4, 5, somewhere right around there. But these are really thicker guys that I think are going to be a lot more physical. And I think they just fit today's NFL really well to where these are guys to where I think you could put some volume to them as soon as we see what team they land on. To where when you saw Jordan Addison come out in 2023, it was you're kind of hoping for the boom stuff, and you still kind of are with him. I think there's 3 or 4 guys in this class that you're going to be able to put in to a slot role. You're like, that guy's going to catch 70 passes this year. And as a rookie, you take that every day of the week.
So I mentioned Chris Godwin. If the Bucs were to move on from him, they have pick 18. I think Burden goes around that 20-ish range.
Agreed.
So for fantasy purposes, I think there's tremendous opportunity. So putting the fantasy spin on it.
Yes, sir.
Where are you looking at Luther Burden right now? You have him, your wide receiver 1. Where is he in your rookie drafts right now? Let's assume 12-team super flex, 1.5 PPR for tight ends.
Right now he's at the 103. I'm really battling what you were talking about last week about having the running backs ahead of him. I still really like him. And so right now I'm going to hold him right between that 103 to 105 landing spot.
And if you're set on him, you're very likely not going to have to take him there.
Exactly. I mean, that's the thing. And I think that's going to be a case for all these wide receivers but one, to be honest.
And I say very, very likely you wouldn't have to take him there. Unlikely might have been a better way to phrase it, but I was really reaching for that very likely. Mitch, I hide in plain sight. That's what I do. I would have Luther Burden. I have him in that 104 to 107 tier.
So
still
really
looking
close.
at it.
Yeah.
So honestly, it's not much of a difference there. There is going to be an opportunity because I think a lot of people are going to have Tet as their wide receiver 1. And I still have Tet as my wide receiver 1, to be honest with you. But in the same tier, neck and neck with Luther Burden, I think there's going to be plenty of opportunities. If you're sitting there at 103 and you're like, I really want to take Luther Burden, you're going to be able to move back. So you have 103. I have him the tier just below that. Looking at the wide receiver landscape, when you compare him to veterans, how would you value him?
I think it's really fair to have him right around wide receiver 15 to 20. Like right now, I can't put him as a top 12 guy like what we saw with Neighbors and Harrison. And I mean, if Burden comes in and has the exact same year that Marvin Harrison has, I'll be extremely happy, but we're not locking him in as Dynasty wide receiver 3 right off the bat. So right between 15 and 20 is really fair for me.
And because of that, I think a lot of people are going to be more forgiving. I always talk about what is the baseline for these kids coming in. And for Luther Burden, for Tet McMillan, for Emeka Egbuka, whoever we're going to talk about tonight, it's not that high of a baseline. So I think to have him in that Devontae Smith, the Rashee Rice, the Roma Dunze tier right now, that's fair. And that's exactly where I have him. So moving on, where are you going with your wide receiver 2 in this class?
Okay, so I'm listing Travis Hunter here.
I saw.
But it's really hard because I don't think he's going to test at the combine because he just doesn't have to. He's the best player in this draft class, bar none. And there's a strong chance to where he plays cornerback, and so we just don't know. But if he's a wide receiver, he is going to, if he tested at the combine, he would probably have one of the fastest 3 cones we've ever seen as a wide receiver. Like, the guy is an athletic freak. We know he could go over the middle. He has the physicality. He has the physical tools to be an elite wide receiver, and he's 190 pounds. But I'm not worried about his 190 because he plays like he's 210. He isn't a guy to where you have to worry about he's going to go alligator arm over the middle. We saw Sanders kind of put him in some spots. Dude, Travis Hunter goes and gets the ball every time. His contested catch rate is amazing. Like, he has the best hands in this class, but he might not play wide receiver. And so I'm still, if we knew without a shout out, he's going to be a wide receiver, he's my wide receiver 2. That's where we're going right now in January. We will update this in the future, but right now, to me, he's a Bo Jackson type athlete, to where we see these guys come along once every 10 years. And this isn't, the Marvin Harrison generational thing. I'm talking about Travis Hunter as just a football player. There's not 15 dudes in the NFL that are the same as this guy as far as athletic goes.
When you talk about athletes, it's Bo Jackson, Travis Hunter, John Bauer. Those are
really close. Yeah, I was going to bring you up, but I didn't want to inflate your ego anymore.
No, it could never be inflated anymore. But Travis Hunter, because I'm a little bit more conservative in situations where we don't have really any clarity. And this is such a unique situation. If you have somebody that's coming in off the top rope with 100% certainty, and they're speaking in absolutes when it comes to Travis Hunter, I'm going to call BS because we don't know. If you looked at him, if he were just a wide receiver with his profile, with what we know up to this point, he would actually be my wide receiver 3 or 4. But because there is that level of uncertainty, he's my wide receiver 5 right now in this class. And I'm going to jump right into where I have him when you look across the board at rookies. He's in that 112 to 203 tier for me. And this came up during one of the mocks that we just had on the DD Fantasy Football YouTube channel. We talked about Travis Hunter at 112, and that's like the perfect high upside play and situation because you just won the championship. You have the 112, presumably in this situation. You didn't move it, and you're able to go with a home run play in Travis Hunter. So he's one that I'm probably going to end up having very few shares of, just because we don't know what the cornerback wide receiver split's going to look like.
I think we're going to know by the time the draft happens, though. That's my thing. I think we're going to have a very strong idea if he's a cornerback that plays some wide receiver or if he's a wide receiver that you could see. I don't even know why they would have him on the field as defensive back. But if that's the case, I think we're going to have an idea, and that's why I'm willing to list him here in January. Like I said, if we hear different things in March, then he'll probably be just like you. He'll be off my list at that point. He'll be, early second round guy.
And because of where I have him, there are 28 veteran wide receivers I have over him. And then because he's my wide receiver 5 right now, we're up to 33 players. Then I have him tier with about 10 other wide receivers. So we're in that 32 to 42 range-ish, somewhere around there. If all goes well, if he does end up being, let's just say he's a wide receiver, you have him a wide receiver 2, where does that put him on your rookie draft board in 12-team Superflex leagues, and then compared to veterans?
106. So he's right there at the 106. He's right after the 3 main running backs, quarterbacks, and he's right there. Cross-positionally, wide receiver-wise, I have him between 20 and 25. He's right where our wide receiver 3 is going to be. I think it's fair for these guys because I do worry about the production as a rookie, and it's just pumping the brakes a little bit. I mean, I think wide receiver 15 to 20 is fine as well, but you have a lot of guys in that range. I mean, just looking at yours, you have Devontae Smith, George Pickens, Rashee Rice, Rome Odunze, DK Metcalf, Zay Flowers, and you have like a ton of guys there that are going to produce next year, I think, without a shot of a doubt. Now it's like, we love these rookies and we love to put them in above these guys, but they also have to produce.
Yep.
And so that's kind of the hedge that I'm making on this wide receiver class.
And we see what happens whenever they don't produce. It's a slippery slope, and you have to kind of balance that out. Now, your wide receiver 3, my wide receiver 1, Tet McMillan. Speak to me.
Yeah. Here's the thing. I don't want anyone to think this is a hot take because it's really not. It's just I really, really like what Luther Burden does, and I think Travis Hunter's a freak. But with Tet McMillan, everyone knows what you're getting. I know he's getting comped to Mike Evans a lot. I have a hard time comping people to Hall of Fame players, even though I just, call Travis Hunter Bo Jackson. But that's a little
from
different.
An athlete perspective,
it's
I get that.
Different. Yeah.
I get that.
That's good. That's good. I want to make sure I wasn't too out there. But with McMillan, here's what you're getting. You are getting the prototypical 6'4" guy who's extremely physical, has a huge wingspan, and great ball skills. But the reason why he isn't my dominant wide receiver 1 is because you don't see him pull away from guys in college. And I'm not saying that means he's going to be bad. I'm just saying that for me, he's not that elite wide receiver 1 prospect up above everybody else. I don't even want to talk about run blocking with him because he just doesn't run block. I mean, there are times to where he's running to the side of the field and he just stands and watches his guy and he doesn't even bother attacking. And I know something we don't care about in fantasy at all, but when I'm watching what is supposed to be a big physical dominating wide receiver and I'm seeing that, it gives me a little bit of pushback. But I mean, this guy's still my wide receiver 3. I think he's actually 6'5", right? So, I mean, dude's huge. He's everything you kind of want. His top end speed is also just a little bit worrying with me. I think, from the snap to the 20-yard line, I think he's great. I think he could make a little bit of quickness. He could get a little bit of separation. But if you're trying to throw him go balls, that ball's going to have to be pretty perfect back shoulder so he could go and get it that way. Tell me if I'm wrong here, man, because I know he's your wide receiver 1, and I know he's probably 80% of people's wide receiver 1. I'm having a really hard time with it this year.
Yeah. And I know you mentioned, hey, he's my wide receiver 3. Doesn't mean I don't like him, but just because he's not your wide receiver 1, I think you're going to have very little Tet McMillan.
Oh, I agree. Result. Yeah, someone is going to take him before me.
But, you talk about the high end, the top end speed, about 4.5-ish 40 time, and bear with me as I go through my analytics here.
You're good.
20% breakout age. That is a combination of final and best year receiving yards and receiving touchdowns for anybody not familiar. 19-year-old breakout age. When you bump that up to a 30% scale, 20-year-old. So still achieving high-end production, 44% college dominator, which is the combination there as well. That's the best in final versus the breakout ages when they hit the 20% combined with those two. So a little bit of a miss when I define that there. So just to clarify. Final year ADOT 13.7, final year yak per reception 5.1. The big thing here is the contested target rate. You get a lot of these big body guys, Denzel Mims, N'Keal Harry, a lot of these guys that didn't create separation, but they were at worrisome levels. His final season here in 2024 was at 22%, and that in itself is not a concern. Right. Now, that was an improvement compared to the 26% in 2022 and 2023. So it is good to see that he did improve. Best season receiving yards per team pass attempt, 3.02. Best season receiving yard market share, 44%. Reception market share, 32%. He's good against man. He faced a ton of it in comparison to other prospects.
He did. Yes.
Contested target rates higher, but really, it's not all that alarming to me because he demands that high target rate when he's running a route. He's getting targeted. 60% contested catch rate in 2024. So the big red flag is when a guy comes in, he doesn't separate, and he doesn't catch those balls when he doesn't separate. He's going to give you the high first downs per route run against man, really good red zone target. He can operate out of the slot too, Mitch, 22%.
Oh, yeah.
Now, you mentioned Mike Evans as a comp that people are throwing out there.
Here's one that I like. Tell me if I'm wrong. Michael Pittman. I think he's a perfect blend between Michael Pittman and Mike Evans.
He actually, Pittman, as I'm going through and narrowing down and adjusting different variables, Pittman stays in there for a while. Yeah. So I think that's definitely one. And it's hard because you get a 6'5" receiver. You only have so many realistic comps.
Exactly.
He's 6'5", and he's going to get a lot of Drake London comps, who was 6'4". But Drake London, especially his final season, he operated much closer to the line of scrimmage than Tet McMillan did.
Yep.
You look at his ADOT, you look at his yak per reception, his ADOT was under 10. There was a lot, close to the line of scrimmage. He was being utilized in the backfield when he was at USC. I actually think a Cortland Sutton that is a little bit better as a prospect from a contested catch rate.
See, and I wanted to bring up, I was going to say Nico Collins, but my problem is I think Nico Collins is just faster than what McMillan is.
And he was one of those worrisome contested target rate guys.
Yeah. Took him a couple years to figure it out too.
And for Sutton, I know a lot of people are going to say, well, if that's one of the better comps for Tet McMillan, That's so gross. But you got to remember, Cortland Sutton, like just dealing with injuries, awful quarterback play. There were certainly situations, and there were variables there that were out of his control. And then I think Roma Dudze is a decent comp when you look at it from a lot of analytical viewpoints here. So for me, talking about him as my wide receiver 1, talking about that tier of 15 to 20 where I had Luther Burden, Tet McMillan's right there too. So you have Tet coming in at wide receiver 3. Where are you? And I had Luther Burden, the 104 to 107 tier.
Yeah. Same
thing for Tet. So where are you now coming in at the wide receiver 3 below Luther Burden and Travis Hunter?
So I have him right next to Travis Hunter, have Travis Hunter at 106 and then Tet at 107. I mean, you take Hunter out, then all of a sudden I have Tet, in the top half of the first round, or probably everybody has him, to be honest, depending on how you look at the running back. So I'm extremely close, just a little bit of pushback on a couple things about him. And just like Travis Hunter, you put him in there wide receiver 20 on the Dynasty side before we actually get the teams and we could fill out the projections that I know you and I are going to be working on here soon. It's just the class, man. Like, this isn't the 2024 class to where you have these dominant guys coming in. It's kind of going back to what we've always seen. Like, hey, we'll see what these dynasty wide receivers do the first year, and we'll move on from there.
All right, Mitch, let's see your wide receiver 4 in the 2025 class.
I think this one is probably everybody's wide receiver 4, or really close to. But it's Egbuka out of Ohio State. We're recording before the championship game tonight, so hopefully everything goes well. I think he's gonna go out there and dominate, though. You brought up Chris Godwin, and I think everyone kind of compares Egbuka to JSN just because slot guy, Ohio State. It's kind of what we do. But Egbuka is so close to Chris Godwin because he is just so physical at the point of attack that I feel a lot of these nickel cornerbacks aren't able to stack up against him. I think he his upside is really, really good as long as he goes to a team that's going to use him in the right spot. He's extremely quick out of cuts, but I do feel like he is he's a slot only guy. Yeah, he can play some outside if needed, but I think kind of like JSN, 80% of the time he needs to be in the slot. But if I'm comparing anybody to Chris Godwin in this class, I think Egbuka is like the perfect guy to compare him to.
That's fair. Previously, historically, Egbuka would be one of those guys non-early declare. But again, COVID, the way NIL works, the way the transfer portal works in general, like that is kind of going to take a back seat when you go through analysis, I think. Even though I still have a slight weight to it, it's not nearly as weighted as it would have been. So, he's going to be one of the fastest times, 4.35, 40, I'm guessing. 20-year-old breakout age, didn't eclipse 30%. But the same way we talked about last week with Travion Henderson and Quinshawn Judkins. Well, when we talk about Nick Singleton and Katron Allen, there is that the guys you played with situation.
It's a thing. It just is.
So the competition on your own team, he is going to give you, just like Luther Burden, he gives you a really nice yak per reception of 6. Final year ADOT 7.8. So really operated close to the line of scrimmage. Not a high contested target rate, gives you the receiving yards per team pass attempt of 281. Really small sample size against man, but he caught everything.
Yeah.
Play
man against the Ohio State offense and see what's going to happen to you. Right. So again, very small sample size. Like you mentioned, the slot, 80% slot rate, fantastic, incredible, unbelievable 2022 season where he was neck and neck with Marvin Harrison in the way they were producing, and then disappointing 2023, but he missed a lot of time due to injuries. I thought if he performed well in 23, he would have declared last year. I think a lot of people thought that may have been a possibility. Almost 60% contested catch rate. We got a lot of dudes in this class that are they're not 50-50 balls when they're involved. No. Yep. We're not going to bring up my favorite player. I mean, his catch rate's insane. It's just a really, really good class as far as catch rates go.
we'll leave that little teaser hanging out there when we go a little bit further beyond our top 5. But now, so Egbuka, I'm going to have him here in that 108 to 111 tier, right before where I had Travis Hunter. And then coming in at, in that 22 to 28 tier. Like, I think there's the high end guys in this class. They are good receivers, but we don't have the dominant alpha monster with that strong baseline and that perceived value coming in right off the bat. But there's good receivers in this class. So don't get it twisted that, we're sitting here saying this class is trash. We just came off a historic class.
That's exactly it. Yes. Okay. So I'm
are you in that kind of that same spot?
So as far as putting him in, as far as wide receivers, the NFL Dynasty ranking overall, I agree that 20 to 25 spots, great. If I'm going to tier him in rookie draft picks, I have him 110 to the 112 because I have him after the 3 big running backs. I have him after Sanders and Cam Ward, and then the 3 wide receivers we'd already mentioned, and then Tyler Warren. So like that, I have a pretty strong top 9 right now, but you don't have Travis Hunter, in your top 9. So if I took him out, I would have him almost exactly right where you do.
Yeah, very few wrinkles here. The ranges that we're looking at these players, I think they're very similar. Yeah, the orders are going to vary. We definitely saw a little bit more eye to eye when we were looking at the running backs last week. If you haven't had a chance, go check out the running back conversation from last week, just hitting on our top 5, and make sure you like this video. And I know you're already subscribed to the channel, but before you drop off, Mitch, hit us with your wide receiver 5 in this class.
Okay, so I think this is where you could list 12 different guys, to be honest with you. Right now, I feel the most confident in Trey Harris out of Ole Miss. To me, he's like just the X wide receiver in this class, to where there's not a lot of X wide receivers. Granted, there's not a lot of Z wide receivers either, to be honest with you. But I mean, he's 6'3", 210, big bodied. He's just a physical monster. I kind of wanted to comp him to Keenan Allen, but we know Keenan Allen's kind of been more of a slot big guy, and Trey Harris is just be flat out faster than Keenan Allen. But Keenan Allen, when you watch him like film wise, he's just huge. Like, he is just a big guy. And I think Trey Harris fits really, really close to him as far as like comparing him to the other guys. That's kind of it though. Like, I think he's just an X. Like, I don't really think he's going to be a slot guy. I don't think he's ever going to go out and play the Z like, Jefferson does. I think that's kind of where he's going to be. And it kind of limits his upside a little bit, kind of like what's always happened to a Devontae Smith, to where like we kind of know what he's going to do and we really like him, but is the top end there? And I don't know if it is, but there's some other guys in this class to where I think can probably end up overtaking Trey Harris in my 5th spot. And I'm really excited to dive into those here in a future episode.
For me, Trey Harris, I said this on the previous mock drafts that have been done on the channel and just some previous conversations. He is a big play machine waiting to happen. He's not going to give you that elite speed, 4.55-ish maybe. 20-year-old breakout, 20-year-old 30% breakout, almost 40% college dominator, final year ADOT 12.1, still giving you a ton after the catch too. Typically, you see the higher ADOT, you don't see a 7.7 yak per reception. Contested target rate really came down his final year, down to 12%. It was pretty high prior to that. Best season receiving yards per team pass attempt, 389. He was dinged up here in 2024, missed a decent amount of time. You talk about the lack of playing in the slot, 14%. When you look at the wide receivers in this class, his quarterback had one of the highest ratings when targeting him. So he is a quarterback's friend with the way he earns targets, gets the absurd yards per route run, creates separation against man, and he produced from the start in the SEC, comes over 2 full seasons at Louisiana Tech, didn't really play back in 2020, had over 1,000 yards in just 8 games this year, and good in the red zone, large catch radius, 62% contested catch rate. He's another guy that he could be a willing blocker. The one con that I'm seeing from folks from a film perspective is his route tree. But, and I'm not saying they're the same guy at all, so don't.
Right. Yeah.
But Brian Thomas, his route tree was in question coming in last year. Am I saying Trey Harris is Brian Thomas? No, but there are certainly things that I think the rest of his profile, despite being a little bit older, the non-early declare, like I mentioned with Egbuka, there's a lot to like with Trey Harris, and I actually have him at wide receiver 4. You asked me, hey, John, am I a little high on Trey Harris? And I was like, I won't say what I said via text to you, but you were not too high in my opinion.
Yeah, and I think going into rookie drafts, right now he is in the spot after the guys that I like, right? And this one's going to be really fluid. I have him at the 111, but right after him, I have like Colston Loveland, right? Jalen Royals. I have Dylan Sampson right there. Travion Henderson. I mean, I have so many guys that are right there that could be late first, early second, mid second, all depending on how kind of the rest of this early draft off season goes.
All right. Well, hopefully you enjoyed this week's episode of Trending Fantasy. Like we said last week, each and every week, we're going to be taking a topic or I guess it was 2 weeks ago now with our first episode, but taking a topic that is really being discussed on social media, in league chats, whatever the case may be, and really diving into it. We're going to be digging a little bit deeper when it comes to running backs and wide receivers in the near future, and we'll probably be hitting on tight ends maybe next week. This is a really nice tight end class. For Mitch Sorensen, I'm John Bauer. Hit that like button, hit subscribe. We'll catch you next week. Peace.
You got barbecue back there, and you didn't invite me. Hurt my feelings.